Everybody, welcome back to Circle of the Blind Mice, where we are low on vision but high on tech. Back again with another video, and this one is for those of you who have yet to jump on the smartphone bandwagon, but you're thinking of finally making that change and ditching your old ancient flip phone and finally getting a smartphone of some kind, but maybe you're trying to make up your mind between iOS and Android as to what might work better for your visual impairment. Or perhaps you have got a smartphone and you've only ever used one type of smartphone and you're thinking of jumping platforms. Maybe you have an iOS device and you want to see what it's like on Android, or vice versa. So this video is for you. I myself have fingers in both pies. I am both an iOS and an Android user. My very first smartphone was an Apple iPhone back in 2010, and I stuck with that faithfully for a little over 2 years. And then I finally defected over to Android because Samsung started offering the Note lineup for the very first phablets, and with the larger screen I couldn't say no to that, so I defected. So I'm going to show you a few things I like about each platform, as well as some of the things that I don't like so much, just to make you aware as a consumer, because for many years Apple was the go-to device for anybody with a disability, and rightfully so, because Apple builds accessibility into the forefront of every single device that they build. So whether it's an iPad, an iMac, an iPhone, an Apple Watch, Apple TV, a MacBook, doesn't matter. Apple puts accessibility in everything, and they have a very robust suite of accessibility options, which I will now read out to you. I won't go into them in detail, but I'll read them out. So if you have an iPhone, iPad, or iPod, you will have VoiceOver, Zoom, invert colors, grayscale, speech, large text, bold text, button shapes, increase contrast, reduce motion, on-off labels, and then they have a number of options for those with mobility and physical impairments where they can't press things as easily. They also have options for hearing impaired, learning impaired, and then under the media section they have an option for descriptive video or descriptive audio for watching movies. So Apple has a huge array of accessibility options, and that's why the visually impaired community has gravitated to Apple. A lot of my visually impaired friends that are totally blind are close to it. They have maybe 1 or 2% vision, so they're reliant on Braille, not able to appreciate pictures and whatnot as much. They pretty much all gravitate towards the iPhone. So definitely it's a good thing to consider if you're just starting out. It's also worth noting that iOS and Apple products tend to have a much gentler learning curve compared to Android products, but Android has come a long way, so it's definitely something to still consider. Now, before I go into some of the things that I don't like so much about iOS and Apple products, I will give you a quick demonstration of VoiceOver and the Zoom. So the Zoom, there are a number of different types of Zoom you can choose from, but this is just the basic Zoom. This is a full screen Zoom, and you can customize how much you're zoomed in. So you can have it, you can move up and down to customize the level. So that's a really nice feature, and I will use that occasionally when I want to read some font that is small on the screen. Now the next bit I'm going to show you VoiceOver. Now brace your ears, because with the screen capture software that I'm using, the volume is going to get really loud. I'll try to edit that in post-production so it doesn't come in quite so loud, but just in case I can't, turn your volume down for just a few moments. So this is what VoiceOver sounds like.
VoiceOver on. Messages. Double tap to open. Landscape. Calendar. Friday, February 5th. Tune in radio. Double tap to open. Facebook. 10 new items. Double tap to open. YouTube. Double tap to open. VoiceOver off.
So you get the picture. So great if you can't see the font on the screen, you can get the voiceover to read things out to you, and it describes what's on the screen and whatnot. So that is pretty good in that respect. Now, for the downsides, and there are a few to be aware of. First thing is, if you want customization to be able to change the layout of your screen, you're not going to get that here. If you could choose to get an Apple iOS device, iPad, iPod, iPhone, you're going to be stuck with this lovely, endless, monotonous grid of icons. Sure, you can drag your icons to, be in a different order, but that's basically all you can customize. And yes, of course, you can change your wallpaper and on your home screens and your lock screen. So if you have enough vision to be able to appreciate that, then that's nice. But in Android, you can customize so much more. So is it a deal breaker? No, but it's something to be aware of. The other thing that irks me about iOS is the inconsistency when it comes to large print. Apple doesn't take it far enough, in my opinion. Now, if you go into your mail or your iMessage, which I won't go in there because I'll end up showing friends and family's personal information, which I obviously don't want to do. But if you go into like programs like Messages and iMessage and email, you're going to get large print in the message part of the application, but the side menu is puny. And if you look at the icons on my main screen here, or not the icons, rather the text below the icons, it's puny. If we go into iTunes, sure, the menus, or the headings are very large. So for those of you that can't see this, the headings are in dark, bold, big black letters because I've got my large text accessibility setting to the maximum. But the descriptions of the albums are microscopic. So Apple, if your user has selected a large print option, we don't just want occasional large print. We want large print everywhere. Yes, of course, you can switch voiceover on, you can switch zoom on, but why should we have to? If large print is your accessibility option of choice, we should have large print a lot more consistently. Now, of course, Apple is not going to, I understand that they're not going to put large print in the side menus for aesthetic reasons, but they could put, they have enough room, especially on the iPhone 6 Plus, iPhone 6s Plus, the iPads. You could put larger print in those sidebars. Now, there are certain apps that are great. Like I'll show you here. Here's the calculator. It's wonderful. This is a third-party app you can get from the iTunes store. And here's like a clock. Again, I got that from the iTunes store because I don't always want to have to turn my iPad off to check the time. So I got this large print clock. But then you've got stuff like the calendar. Now, the numbers are okay. They could be bigger, though. I do have to squint at them to be able to read them. And those of you with 1 or 2% there, you have no chance at all of reading these numbers unless, you got voiceover on and whatnot. But the text in the calendar is too small. Now, granted, looking at a month view, they can only fit so much in, but they could still do better with such a giant screen in the way that, you can make software to sort of adjust to text size and what's the word I'm looking for? Re-render the graphics. There's no reason why they couldn't have larger print in the calendar. Another point is the timer. Look at all this waste. Oh no, this is not the calendar, or not the item I wanted. Sorry, the timer. Helps if I go to the timer. One moment, because I forgot where I left it. Here we go. So the timer. Look at all this wasted space. You're looking at a huge iPad screen here. All this wasted space. I stress I'm on large print option. Do you see anything even resembling large print? I shouldn't have to view my timer like this. I should be able to view the whole screen, and there's so much room in here. Total wasted opportunity. And Apple tends to do that a lot with their iOS devices. They don't take full advantage of their full screen. And I mean, yeah, you have the odd app that is pretty good. But you know what? Actually, with what I tend to do now, this is kind of a segue over to iPad. Again, this is more this video is for those of you considering to get an iPhone. But just as a quick aside, Apple tends to be known for not maximizing their iPad screen for their apps. And now I actually tend to download iPhone apps whenever available. I download the iPhone version because it makes it larger print and more accessible, because I find that the iPad apps, they crams a whole bunch of information into the screen, and they don't take advantage of the room to offer large print. But this is here's an old weather app which has told, I don't even think this version is available anymore, but I've kept it over the years and refused to upgrade it because look at that font, it's beautiful. Even the smaller font, if I hold my iPad close enough, I can read that without having to use any magnification. So, you know, certain apps like that are great, but I just find so many apps in iOS could be larger. Now, another thing I want to show you is the issue with widgets. Now, widgets are only available in the notification panel, and you cannot resize them. Now, sure, you can use Zoom to look at the image, but then you're stuck looking at only part of the widget at a time. And the whole purpose of widgets is to be able to view information really quickly at a glance. And this kind of defeats the purpose when you're only seeing a fraction of it at a time. Now, of course, I could reduce my zoom level if my iPad would cooperate with me. It doesn't want to cooperate for some reason. There we go. But I could reduce my zoom level to a lower level and look at the widget. But as you can see, I kind of had to fight. I don't know if I need to clean my screen or what, but I'm kind of having to fight with the zoom. I shouldn't have to deal with that. I should just be able to go and resize my widget so that it's larger and I can read it without having to play and fight with zoom. So that is, another thing just to be aware of. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not. And I realize I'm being overly picky here, but that's just because I want you as a consumer to know about the downsides, because Apple, they are wonderful for accessibility, but there are some oversights that they just maybe didn't think about. Maybe for aesthetics, they've decided to just leave by the wayside, but it's just something to know as a consumer so you can make an informed choice, because you do have a choice. You are not completely limited to Apple anymore. Those days are gone. There's so much flexibility with Android. It's something you want to consider. Now, there was one other thing I did want to show. Oh, yes, I didn't want to show you. I wanted to tell you. The other thing to really be aware of with Apple devices is price. You are going to pay a pretty penny if you get an Apple device, even if you get an older model, which whenever I've gotten Apple devices, except with the exception of my current iPad, which is the iPad Air 2, when I got my first iPhone, it was an iPhone 4. I got it 1 month before the 4S came out, and a lot of my visually impaired friends who are on limited income that are considering an iPhone right now, they're going to go with an older model because of the fact that they're so expensive. But even the older model can be as much as anywhere as little as 4 times more expensive than an Android device, all the way up to about 11 or 12 times as expensive. Now, I did not go with the Note 5, the latest model. I only got my Note 4 a couple of months ago. I upgraded from the Note 2. The reason I didn't go with the Note 5 was because of the cost, and unfortunately I was laid off a number of months ago, so I decided to go with the cheaper option. So I went with an older model, and I know a lot of my fellow visually impaired blind mice will be doing the same. So, but just to give you a comparison, the Note 4 on a 2-year contract right now, it's a 32 gigabyte Note 4, but it has expandable storage of 128 gigabytes. Add that together, you get 160 gigabytes for $50 Canadian. And if you're elsewhere in the world where you're currency is a lot better than ours is right now, you can probably get it for even cheaper than that. Now, by comparison, if you go and get yourself a 2014 iPhone model, which would have been, say, the 6S Plus, or pardon me, the 6 Plus, which has, if you go with the top model of 128 gigabytes, just to sort of do a relative comparison, or a relevant comparison rather, the 128 gigabyte iPhone 6 Plus currently retails as of February 2016 at $560 Canadian plus tax for that model. Now, of course, you can get a model with less storage, but you're going to run out fairly quickly, especially if you love to store your audio, your music on your device, or your audiobooks or ebooks, or even your video games. And yes, for those sighted people watching, they do make video games for visually impaired people. So again, it's something to be aware of. Now, if you're going to store all your stuff in the cloud, then you might not care about your storage so much. But Canadians pay some of the highest prices for their cell phone plans, so you might want to consider getting more storage than not. Most of you could probably get away with a 64 gigabyte iPhone. I'm an audio nerd though, and I have so many songs. Like, I've got over 5,000 songs, and most of them are on my phone. So I chose to go, whenever I get an iOS device, I get the larger one. So, but it's again, something to be aware of is the price. Android is a lot cheaper, and because Android has come a long way, you're still getting a lot for much, much less money. So that is something to bear in mind. Now, with that being said, I'm going to move on over to my Note 4. Well, I will tell you some of the things that I like about Android so you can make a comparison. There are some downsides to Android. Oh, no, actually, I lied. There was one more thing I want to show you on my iPad. When you're in iBooks and you've got voiceover on, I won't turn voiceover on again because it will make all of us deaf when we listen to this video back. But when you got voiceover on, it will read you the whole page, and then it gets to the end and it stops rather than automatically continuing to the next page. So you're tied to your phone having to swipe to the next page. Now, if you're sitting down, relaxing, listening to your ebook, that's not so bad. But if you want to putter out about the house and multitask, it's kind of annoying. So is it a deal breaker? No, absolutely not. Now, of course, you can also go with an audiobook, which many, many visually impaired people do. But the one thing, or the one downside to audiobooks, is the selection is not as robust as it is for ebooks. So something to be aware of. Is it a deal breaker? No, but again, it's something just to keep in mind when you're comparing platforms. So that being said, I will now move on to what my Note 4, where I'll tell you a bit more about Android, what I like, and a few of the things that are a bit of a challenge. And one thing just to keep in mind real quick about Android is, unlike Apple, where you're just limited to Apple and you're pretty much guaranteed to pay a high price unless you're buying a model several generations back, with Android, Google makes the software and then they allow other companies to load their software on their operating system on their phone rather. So you have a lot more choice when it comes to manufacturers. And what that does is it really opens up the playing field price-wise. So you can have low-budget Android phones. You can also have high budget, and you also have the mid-range. As someone with a visual impairment, you want to have a device that is fairly decent so it can handle the accessibility software and whatnot. I would suggest staying away from the low-budget phones and sticking with the mid-range. If you have a bit of extra cash to spare, you can find a good deal, then definitely consider the higher budget, like the Samsung devices and whatnot. When I got my first Note 2 back in 2012, I paid $0 on a 2-year contract. That's Canadian, but zero is zero no matter what currency you're in. And then with my Note 4, I paid about $140 for it, but now it's come down even more in price, and you can get it, like I said, for $50 on a 2-year contract. So shop around for your Android device if you're going to go that route. And without further ado, we'll now move on to my Note 4. Okay, so this video has run a little longer than I anticipated. I guess I've got a lot more to say on the topic than I realized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually split this up into 2 videos. Part 2 will be uploaded hopefully in the next few days if nothing goes wrong in the meantime. And once I have that uploaded, I'll be sure to put a description in, or pardon me, I'll put a link rather in the description, so be sure to check that. If you're watching this after February the 10th, then just check the description. There should be a link down there. And in the meantime, if you've actually made it this far through my babbling and you've enjoyed what you've heard, or perhaps you've actually found something of use in my ramblings here, then please subscribe, hit that like button. It really does help me out. Share with your fellow blind mice, and also you can follow me at my blog to coincide with this channel, which is circleoftheblindmice.com. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/circleoftheblindmice. And last but not least, I'm also on Twitter at blindmice. Now the on the Twitter handle, the L is actually the number 1, so that's B and then 1 and then INDMICE. Reason why I have that odd spelling is the proper spelling was already taken, and Twitter wouldn't let me put a handle that was as long as Circle the Blind Mice, and I thought the acronym just, no one would get they would look at the acronym and go, what the heck is this? So I just went with Blind Mice. I felt that was simpler. But anyhow, I think that's pretty much it for now. So thanks again for listening if you made it this far, and I will talk to you again in the next video.